Tonight, the January 6th committee is holding its last scheduled primetime public hearing. It is set to begin at 8 p.m. Eastern, and the panel will focus on what Trump did or didn't do when rioters attacked the Capitol. So for more on this, we want to bring in political correspondent Caitlyn Huey-Burns. He's joining us from the White House. So, Caitlyn, give us a sense of where this hearing and the focus of this hearing, how it plays into the overall argument that the committee has been presenting.
Hey, good morning, Emery. Well, the committee today is going to focus on 187 minutes. That's the time between where we saw the riots first happen and then we saw that published video from Donald Trump from the Rose Garden. And the question this committee has is, what was the president doing during that time? Because we know that he was not calling off the riots. And so your intro really nails it down, which is, what was he not doing? And they are calling this a dereliction of duty. And so they are going to present evidence of what the president was or wasn't doing. And that kind of threads the needle that they've been trying to make through these various committee hearings, that not only the president knew what was happening, but did nothing to stop it. And so you have a primetime hearing tonight, which suggests that this committee feels like it has something new to present to the public.
So speaking of that, committee members say that we can expect to see for the first time outtakes from a recorded speech former President Trump gave on January 7th. What more do you know about that?
Yeah, this will be new information that the committee is putting forward, and it does raise the question about how the president was feeling about this, and the outtakes, we don't know what they will be, but could kind of take us into the president's mindset and whether he, even wanted to do this. And that's kind of the big question here is what he wanted to happen on January 6th and what he, didn't do to essentially stop it. And so we've been hearing from a variety of different voices throughout all of this, talking about what the president knew. We have learned throughout this committee process that he knew there was a violence that was likely to occur because he knew that people in the crowd had weapons. We also learned from various people around him that he knew that he didn't have the power to overturn the results, despite all of these avenues he tried to go down. And so this will be kind of a way to kind of connect all of this, and we'll see what comes out of that newly released footage from those outtakes.
Former Trump White House staffer Garrett Ziegler testified privately before the committee on Tuesday. The committee keeps reminding us that this is an ongoing investigation and increasingly people are coming forward. What do we know? Who is this guy? And, why would his testimony be important? And is there a possibility it could come up tonight or maybe in a later hearing? I know they don't have any more scheduled hearings, but that doesn't mean they won't have one.
Well, the interesting thing about this committee process is that we're learning the names of some, obscure aides that nobody really knew about, or the general public wouldn't know these people. But this is an aide to Peter Navarro, who, of course, was the trade rep to the Trump administration and someone who was in Trump's ear pushing these false claims and trying to work on overturning the results. And there was a meeting that Ziegler introduced people to, or brought into the White House to attend, where they were talking about these wild conspiracy theories and entertaining the idea of seizing voting machines. And so that's kind of been the centerpiece of this. And there are questions about, how he orchestrated that meeting, if he did. And then we also know that he, after appearing in front of the committee, behind closed doors, he went on a profanity-laced rant, a sexist rant against the committee and against people who have testified, particularly two women who worked in the White House. And so that kind of speaks to the mentality that was going on at the time, but also that continues.
Interesting. Caitlyn, thank you very much.